So I think we are going to pass on to you, Arash.
All right. Well, great ideas. Thanks a lot for sharing. Um, I'm going to walk you through some of my ideas when it comes to design thinking. So I'm going to share my screen and show you a set of slides that I've prepared. And then we'll see there's a lot of ideas that you have already mentioned, which are very valuable and right to the point. I'm here to tell you a little bit about the theory behind them and to show you some of the, let's say, basic principles that I work with in design thinking. So the title of the talk is Design Thinking Beyond the Surface, because I believe a lot of design thinking activities are superficial and they're not touching the right issues. And I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to show you a number of ideas how more depth can be added to design thinking activities. First of all, we start with the root for the word design. As you can see, the word design shares a root with some other words. So it's the same as significance, signify, designate. What this shows is that, and in French we say signification, which means meaning. So there is something significant, something important, something meaningful, at the same time something subjective about design that should not be glossed over. That's the very first thing. So there is a human dimension. When we talk about meaning, we are talking about humans because we are meaning finding or meaning making animals. We look for meaning. We seek meaning in our encounters. We try to translate events into meaningful experiences for ourselves. So we can't talk about design without touching on the notion of human. And it's very relevant to your task as HR managers because you work with human beings. So I think design thinking is in its essential form goes hand in hand with basically human resource management. Now, where are we with design? Humans, we talk a lot about human-centered design. And when you look at business practices working with design, you see that there's a lot of segmentation of people. They put them into different segments that share some basic characteristics. They look at the demographics of the customers or of the individuals, of the users, again, categorization. And most recently, this has evolved towards creating customer personas. The word persona is the Latin for mask, is the mask that an actor wears. Now, how much can we know about the actor by the roles he plays from one movie to the other? Not much, because these roles change, but the essence in the actor stays the same. So we try to basically, you can see some pictures of customer personas here, sketching people on the surface, what they do, how old they are, what type of stuff they own, how many hours a week they work, and so on and so forth. This is as much as interested we are about the human dimension in design. Then the question is, customers beyond their personas, how can we understand them? How can we understand them beyond their masks? How can we really explore this human dimension? How about the designer? No one talks about the designer. When we talk about the human-centered design, it's always about the customers, users. It's as if the whole effort is geared towards selling something to people that do not need that artifact in the first place. So we forget about the designer, which is the first customer of the design artifact, in my opinion. So some ideas about some shortcomings of human-centered design that need to be addressed if you are talking about design from the point of view of significance, from point of view of meaning, and from point of view of humans. Now, two notions here, systematic versus systemic, two words that are probably mixed up a lot, and to many people they're the same. What is systematic design? What is systemic design? This is another thing we need to pay attention to. If you look at the meaning of systematic, it means doing things according to an orderly sequence of activities involving steps or phases in logical and linear arrangements. That beautifully describes the design thinking methods that we use. On the right-hand side, we have the design thinking method that is very famous, is used a lot by IDEO. Everyone uses it. It's an orderly sequence of activities. So whenever we talk about design, we're talking about systematic design. And that's when we talk about systematic design, this is a design effort that is more relevant in the world of, let's say, engineering, to design an engineering system in which you go through a specific process of prototyping, testing, and so on and so forth. But when we talk about design that involves the human dimension, this linear and orderly sequence does not work, because imagination, creativity, intuition, and visioning are not a part of it. Those essential properties that we need to pay attention to. Where are these? Imagination is actually a divine element within us. It's an entity within us that turns invisible inner beings into images. That's actually the exact meaning of imagination. It's an image generation faculty within us that turns things that are invisible into imagery that can carry their energies forward. Intuition, where is intuition? Where is vision? We say without vision, people will perish. So these are lost in the systematic design efforts that exist. When you talk about the psyche and how the humans are being treated, basically, and how our attitudes and dispositions are more or less encouraged, it's mainly towards the world of outer objects, with things that we can sense, we can touch with our sensory perceptions. There's a whole bunch of inner objects on the other side of this great divide that are not paid much attention to. These are things that can only be apprehended through innovation, through feeling. So we have an overdominance of sensation and thinking over feeling and intuition. And this also shows in the let's say, methods that we use for systematic design. They're all about thinking and sensing, which is very valid and useful in the world of engineering and natural sciences. But when you talk about social sciences or human social systems, there is definitely a shortcoming on that front. I have an image here from a painting from 16th century, the two ambassadors. You can see every inch of this painting is covered with stuff. It's a sign of wealth, you know, the things they are wearing, the necklaces, the fur jackets, and so on and so forth, and signs of science is all over. So sensation and thinking, you can see that. The globe that they have, the quadrants, the scales, the binoculars, everything there is something, a scientific instrument that people are using. Nowadays, we have the same thing on LinkedIn, but in a different way. You know, the titles of the people that you can see, you cannot understand what's going on. We are still collecting outer world objects, this time of a different nature. At least in the previous picture, we can see some stuff that we can identify. But here we just live in a world of outer objects that we cannot connect to. So this is the type of extreme that we are experiencing now that needs to be balanced with a little bit of, let's say, the human dimension that needs to be inserted and injected in design. And these are pictures from some of my connections and people I've worked with, and I'm not basically, I don't understand what they're capable of anymore, capable of doing. These abbreviations are so complex, even for me, who have had these people as colleagues in the same field. I do not understand what these individuals are capable of doing anymore. Now, the other issue I want to talk about after this idea of systemic and systematic, I'll get back to the notion of systemic in a second, but just understanding the systematic efforts will not really pay off in a world of human beings. Now, we have problem solving versus problem dissolving. How to dissolve a problem. Some ideas over that. What is a problem? You know, we have all these problem solving approaches, a number of, again, sequential steps, very systematic, right? Flow of activities again. What is a problem? Problems, by definition, are point of views. Someone's point of view of a situation is a problem. And this point of view expresses a desire, the difference between a desired and a perceived situation from one person's point of view. So there is no such thing as a problem out there. It's just people with point of views looking at situations, then detecting a difference in what they desire and what is actually out there. That defines a problem for an individual. So when you want to try to solve a problem, you probably enhance that situation in the eye of one individual But then this situation is probably worsened in the eye of other people. So you shift the problem from one individual to another, from one group of constituencies to another, when you engage in problem solving. Problem solving is not design. There is a difference between problem solving and design that we have to pay attention to as well. So problem solving and systematic efforts of linear succession of activities cannot be categorized as true design activities. Instead of problem solving, we should talk about problematic situations. The situations that can be viewed as problems by many different individuals, right? So in our case, if we enhance the situation for Tom, rest assured, we are creating other problems for other constituencies within the system. So these constituencies need to be also included in our scope of analysis. And we have all heard about unintended consequences, symptomatic solutions, fixes that fail, policy resistance. These are all effects, byproduct effects of problem solving. We just shifted from one corner to another. Now, what is dissolving a problem? Dissolving a problem is through design, more specifically by redesigning the system that has the problem so that the problem no longer exists. So you have to go work with the system that has the problem as a part of it, redesign that system so that the problem disappears. That is a design activity. So if you're offering any solution within an existing system, that is not design. You have to transcend the existing system. And that's what makes design systemic. Systemic means coming up with a new notion of the system in which the problem no longer exists. That's the solving the system, the problem, basically. And how can we, a number of good questions here, how can we produce solutions if problems remained unquestioned? You have to question all the underlying assumptions, some of the points that you also mentioned in the conversations that we had before the presentation, but questioning all the underlying assumptions that give rise to the problem. Where does it come from? You have to transcend the problem and the perspective or the worldview from which we approach the problem. So what worldview gives rise to this, not only transcending the problem itself, but also understanding the worldview from which the problem emerges. And that worldview needs to be transcended as well. So instead of going to Tom and telling him, you know what, there's solutions, you can keep track of your employees, there's applications that take snapshots of their computers every second, right? I'm an educator. We had the same issue for exams. What do we do? There were all these people coming up with these technically complex ideas of controlling the students. And I said, how about designing an exam in which people cannot cheat, right? So the questions are designed in such way, you can even give the questions to the students the night before the exam. And who cares? Let them just consult anyone they want, do whatever they want to do, and report back. So this is somehow dissolving the problem rather than trying to find a way to lock their computers so that they cannot launch any applications, so that they are viewed from an angle and then they cannot move or do anything else. But whenever we try to do something like this, there's definitely counterattacks and strategies that will neutralize or dilute what problem-solving mechanism we are using. Some ideas about dissolving the problem. Now, what do we do about this? I'm going to walk you quickly through an idea here that we can employ. This is just a very quick intro to some of the basic principles we can use in design. My first recommendation for you is that stay away from any book that is called design thinking. Any book that has the design thinking in its title, stay away from it, because it reduces it to an absurdity. So what I recommend you, read novels, watch movies, learn things like Japanese gardening, cooking, because design manifests itself in doing things, in disciplines. So it cannot be regarded as a shallow discipline. That's a problem that I have basically with design. Now, when I read this book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, one of the most unexpected places when you can find something about designing, but there are huge insights there. So the idea here is that if this, I just read the quote for you. If a factory is torn down, but the rationality that produced it is left standing, then that rationality will simply produce another factory. So if you help this Tom with this solution, giving a solution like this, he's going to have another problem somewhere else of the same nature. It's going to pop up at some point. If a revolution destroys a systematic government, but the systematic patterns of thought that produced that government are left intact, those patterns will repeat themselves in succeeding governments. Case in point, USA. So the patterns will repeat themselves. Doesn't matter what happens on top, who is president, those patterns are there. Something of similar nature at some point is going to pop up, unless there's a change, a shift in the mindset of the people. There's so much talk about system and so little understanding. I can't agree more with this statement. And finally, the guy is talking about a motorcycle. He says a motorcycle is not parts, is not a product, is basically a system of concepts, ideas worked out in steel. So when you look at a motorcycle, you don't see a set of parts. It's a set of ideas, mental models, assumptions, worldviews that have manifested themselves in the form of physical components. This is really a life-changing insights about systems. So we define system as something out there, right? Something physical. But basically, a system is a set of concepts that has emerged itself in a physical form of one form or another. Now, the idea I want to share with you as a tool for design thinking is looking at events. Is what happened right now is an event. If you catch cold, that's an event. Next step is understanding patterns, situating these events in a larger context, in a broader temporal context, or let's say, understanding them as a family of events that can be relevant or related to one another. That becomes a pattern or a trend. So going down from one occurrence into understanding that occurrence, either in form of a trend that goes on over time. You see, okay, if I've caught cold today, how many times have I been sick this year compared to last year? This becomes a trend right now. We move away from data to information. Then we ask ourselves, for instance, am I meeting my friends as frequently as last year? Am I cooking as frequently as last year? Am I socializing as frequently as last year? I try to see there's some other events that are belonging to the same family here to understand this as a sort of pattern of events, not only one event. Next step is, what is the underlying structure that is giving rise to this? Well, the underlying structure is I'm working 12 hours a day. And all the time I'm thinking about work. So I lack work and life balance. My life is geared toward work than life. And I may have a standard of living, but I don't have a standard of life. What is the mental model? My job gives me my identity. Who I am depends on what I do. Now, if we want to change that idea, that up there, that occurrence, that event, we have to go down, work on that underlying mental model that exists down there. Without touching on that, there's no chance we can change anything up there. As we go down, the leverage increases, but the subtlety also increases. It becomes so subtle. So we are prisoners of the most subtle ideas, assumptions, and mental models that we have. We don't see them. We don't touch base with them. They're there running the show without us having slightest information about their presence. So subtlety increases. At the same time, leverage increases. But events are observable up there, but you cannot basically change anything at that level of intervention. So there's an example from Amazon that I just quickly share with you that they created the marketplace, Amazon Marketplace in 2001, bringing on all the competition to sell their products alongside Amazon's product. That was a novel, let's say, business model at the time. No one else had done that before, inviting the competition to sell their stuff alongside themselves on the same platform. If you read the annual report, if the letter to the shareholder in the annual report in 2006, there is a beautiful passage there. I will not read it for you here, but the idea that Jeff Bezos talks about is that for us, our mental model is not competitive, is not competition focused, it's customer focused. So if we can change something that works for the customers, that's That's what we're going to do. And that's why we're bringing the competition in our platform, because then a customer can have a book at a lower price because of this internal competition that we're creating. So on and so forth. You can read that. It's an amazing example. And then they attach, the funniest part of this is that they attach a scientific article to the package of their 2006 annual report. You say, if this is bizarre to you, what we did here, read this article by Henry Mintzberg. He talks about how decisions are actually made in businesses. And in order to justify their decision to their shareholders, they didn't talk about the decision only. They went to the mental model of it. And they showed an article that showcases something of a similar nature to educate people at the level of the mental models. Otherwise, people wouldn't understand why they made this decision in the first place. So this is the type of initiatives that are, in my opinion, designed because they manipulate that level of understanding. So we have data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. Wisdom is any qualitative change to the way we see, we perceive the world, our mental models, our assumptions, and the way actually we act upon them. Some ideas here for you. This can be seen in the world of physical products as well. I just finished my talk in a couple of minutes. I only have to share with you the fact that the big question then is, where do mental models come from? This doesn't stop there. The biggest part of this iceberg that no one talks about comes at the very bottom, and that's the mechanisms within us that are very unconscious that generate those mental models. Since this is hacking HR, I want to share an idea I have about hacking design thinking education and the imperatives for a paradigm shift in design thinking. Many of us are hearing this. I put together a training course, so I want to share with you quickly in 1 minute what this is about. In my opinion, thinking should not be reduced to analysis. All our thinking is reduced to analytical thinking. Scientific thinking is analytical by definition. We have to embrace other types of thinking, which is synthetic, lateral feedback, and holistic thinking. This is absent in our education. This is where thinking and intuition are merged together. So intuition is about seeing the holistic image, not only perceiving the particular elements of it. I think that we shouldn't stop at the level of thinking. So design thinking is not the right title. We have to connect to our conscious disposition. Thinking is only one of the functions of this conscious disposition. We have sensation, feeling, and intuition as well. If we want to design, we need to connect at that level as well. We need to understand our unconscious processes because that's where our creativity and imagination comes from. Now, as in light of what you know right now, you go back to your sessions and see if there is a change, if something can be viewed differently, or can you come up with a different solution or different sets of questions for Tom.